the weather was too bad and they haven't been able to move. And that's a psychological thing. You're getting psyched out by Antarctica then. It doesn't matter if you're not hitting the pace that you would on a nice day. It wouldn't matter. It doesn't matter if it's exhausting. It doesn't matter if it's not fun, if it's unpleasant. Those aren't the reasons you're there. You're there to make miles and be successful in your goal. I tell the teams and the people that I train, do the toilet test, because you always dig a hole near your camp to go and use the toilet. And I was like, if you are able to get up in the morning, huddle your way over to the toilet and get back to the tent, then could you not have moved all day? Like you just moved 100 yards over there and 100 yards back again.
Yeah.
So get out of your tent and go and do that all day.
Hi, I'm Lauren Parsons.
And I'm Andy Jackson, and this is the All Well Co podcast.
Dive deep with us as leading experts share their unique perspectives on topics such as recovery, sleep, movement, and the latest innovations in the space.
So Hannah, it's such a pleasure to have you on here. I know we've known each other for a couple of years, or maybe a few more. Mm-hmm. It's just amazing to get you on the All Well Co podcast, so thank you very much. What would be really great is that obviously you and I connected ages ago. It'd be great to just give a little bit of background of how we connected before we jump into your amazing career.
That's, we were connecting. I came and did a talk for you back in, you're right, it must be 5 or 6 years ago, in Denver at the beautiful center near REI there, and came and gave a talk on polar expeditions and all that stuff that I've been doing quite recently then, but it's getting further and further away, my guiding and expeditioning adventures. I'm feeling more like a informed middle-aged woman these days rather than the actual action person at the
forefront. You mean the badass action person you were. So well, let's jump into that. So you hold quite a few interesting world records that I think our listeners will be blown away. Can you just explain what those world records are rather than me saying it?
Well, back in 2006, I set a world record I was the fastest person to ski solo and unsupported from the coast of Antarctica to the South Pole. That record stood for 3 years and then was soundly beaten by a Norwegian guy called Christian Eider. And then I discovered that the world considered me then the holder of the female record, which had never occurred to me before because it had been everybody. And it took another 10 years for a young Swedish girl to come and beat my female record. And now I don't hold that record at all. And then I do still hold a record, which is an odd one. I've skied coast to South Pole more times than anyone, which is 6 times, which is definitely a lot for a very long, cold and monotonous journey. I don't think it's a bit of an odd record. I was approached by Guinness, who said, "Is this a thing?" And I went, "I suppose it is." And so
How far is that in terms of distance?
690 miles or 1,100 kilometers or 600 nautical miles, depending on which measurement you work in. I work in nautical miles, but that baffles most people.
And am I right in thinking you pull a sled all the time you're doing this and you take all your gear with you? So this is not just a case of a nice little cross-country ski in the mountains. This is serious stuff.
Yeah, serious stuff. The record that I set was 39 days, 9 hours and 33 minutes. So it took a very long time to set a speed record. I was pulling a sled containing all of the food and fuel and equipment that I needed to sustain myself for that period. When I've been guiding the trip, which I went on to do many times as work, then you have the option to have resupplies. A lot of the time, these guide services provide, make things a bit easier for the clients and guests that they're taking on these trips. And so we had the opportunity to have resupplies along the way and get a pickup of fuel and
You
food.
you imagine 39 days. I mean, after 3 hours skiing in Vail, I'm cold and I want to go in, I want to go inside. 39 days.
Stop for hot chocolate. I mean, come on.
It's just, and
Well,
so
and that's a short one. With clients, it's typically 50, 55 days. There are a couple of different routes.
because they don't
that
go as fast.
change that, but it can be a really long trip. The longest one I've ever done is 56 days, and that's a long
Wow.
time to be out there for sure.
That is a long time to be out there in the cold. So, in terms of, obviously, there's a lot of Antarctic and Arctic expeditions, but you've done other types of expeditions in South America, Egypt, Libya, Sudan. Tell us a little bit about that as well, please.
Yeah, I was honestly really lucky. I just had a really amazing break in my life, which was when I was about 26. I had a godfather who passed away, and I was his only family member, and he left me a large house in London. This just doesn't happen to most people, and I will my whole life be grateful. It was a big 6-floor Chelsea townhouse. I couldn't
wow.
keep it. I needed to sell it to pay off the death duties and taxes and stuff, but it did leave me with about 150 grand in the bank, pounds, and which were worth something back in the day, and a house. And I've always owned a house outright ever since that day. So I was really, really blessed by just the kindness of this human who decided to, bestow his estate on this young woman. And the 150 grand, I swiftly, and he had said, please have an adventure, go and live, experience the world and life. And within 10 years, I'd blown it all on to polar expeditions and getting involved in a bunch of quite unusual travel opportunities. And one of those was volunteering for a group of Hungarians who are the world's leading rock art researchers. So I spent 4 years traveling in the remote parts of the Sahara, helping them survey areas for rock art and cave paintings. I got to join a Royal Geographical Society expedition to Afghanistan to find the source of the river Oxus up in the northeast in the Wakhan corridor. I got to sail around the world in a round the world yacht race. I got to then buy a share, a half share in a big expedition yacht that we refitted for high latitude sailing and set up as a business with my partner and I. And we then did high latitude sailing for 3 years around Antarctica and the Southern Ocean, circumnavigated Antarctica. All these things were based on the fact that financially I had options and was able to, say yes to a bunch of things that people generally don't have that luxury. And I'm so grateful to lovely David Cross, who was that person who made it possible for me.
So would it be fair to say that you went from being a very, very high level athlete in terms of to then moved into more of a business orientated guide? And am I right in thinking you're still involved in, getting people down into Antarctica and involved in planning and expeditions, etc.? Is that a fair representation of your career?
Yeah, very much so. I think I quite quickly used up my interest in doing personal projects and undertaking these personal goals and world records and things. And honestly, although they were lovely things to do, they didn't actually feed what really gets me going, which is becoming highly competent and having such an expertise that I can do things professionally. Like there's a real satisfaction for me in being able to, deliver something in a professional manner and on a professional basis. So I quite quickly sought out, how do I make this into a career? And partly also, bizarrely, because I'm on a podcast talking about myself right now, I don't enjoy that. I don't really enjoy talking about me and oh, I'm a big deal, and in order
okay,
to
we can do that.
continue
Yeah,
pursuing,
we'll do that for you.
We'll do that for you, don't worry.
thanks. But in order to continue pursuing a career as a professional athlete, you have to do that stuff. You have to sell yourself every day, and you have to meet the expectations of sponsors to, you know, be their hero person, and it's just not, it's not my interest. It's not where my heart lies. It feels weird. I now train people to do these kinds of expeditions and meet their own dreams and goals. And I get so much more pleasure out of being, you know, in the background, helping someone fine tune their expertise so that they can then achieve a great, you know, a great goal than I ever did out of being the center of attention and doing those things myself. That sort of feels a bit cringy and embarrassing.
Yeah. Fair enough. I totally get that. It's nice to see when you've coached somebody along what they can do, right? It really opens them up.
So satisfying. Yeah.
Yeah. So it sounds like you've had a lot of fun within your career, but also throughout everything that you've said, often that was in, you know, you were doing things in extreme conditions where physically and mentally the stamina are very much tested. So how did you cultivate resilience, both mentally and physically? And is resilience something that you think can be taught?
Such a nuanced and complicated answer. I think definitely some people have a more natural well of resilience within them. I think it's partly nature, it's partly nurture. You can certainly teach elements of it. Culturally, society has expectations of certain people and certain groups to have resilience, and others not. And I think that changes in waves as well. I sometimes worry about the younger generation now, as I'm sort of enthralled by them and worried about them at the same time. Gen Z, they're the young ones, aren't they? Mm-hmm. You know, they are really good at advocating for themselves and saying, no, for example, that behavior is not acceptable towards me. And that's so admirable. And at the same time, I worry that they don't have the skill set to deal with difficult situations when there isn't an oversight body to go, no, you know, you need to stop this happening in the workplace, for example. Mm-hmm. You know, and in my professional life, I deal with that sort of scenario quite a lot in management positions, where I sort of think, oh, I really want this to be a world where there's no harassment in the workplace. But until we get there, and we're not quite there yet, you know, the organization is responsible for doing everything it can. But then in that moment, on that day when it occurs, I also want that human to have a skill set that gets them out of trouble, or gives them the, you know, the comeback that they need to cut someone down or set them in their place. And it's a balance, you know, and I don't want those skills that I grew up with to be lost by this younger generation who are sort of sitting back more and going, no, the world should be making sure this isn't the world I live in. And they're like, oh, maybe soon, but not yet. So anyway, sorry, I've completely digressed.
No, it's all involved.
Yeah, you know, and I think I grew up in a rural, you know, situation, and I learned to be, you know, cold and muddy and to not complain because, you know, that was, you know, shut up, Hannah, you know, we've still got some, you know, sheep to get in, you know, that kind of thing. Oh, okay. So there was a bit of that in my upbringing. But also there's a pride as well. And maybe it's part of being British, you know, stiff upper lip, don't complain. So, you know, there's all these elements at play that feed into resilience and whether somebody is or isn't. But if you are just starting sort of to prepare somebody, I think a great place to start is making sure that their skill set and their execution of things means that regardless of the situation they're in and the scenario that they're faced with, they have the skill set to make that as comfortable and as seamless as possible, you know, to make execution of a difficult situation sort of mitigate what's difficult about it. If you're in a blizzard, that's a really nasty situation unless you're brilliantly trained, you've got all the right gear, you know how to use that gear, you know how to use that clothing, and you just don't get rattled by it. I think nothing of being in a blizzard. We're skiing for 6 hours in it, no problem, because I'm prepared and I have that skill set. So I think, it's a combination of training and preparation, but a little bit of upbringing and cultural input, and it's so many things, isn't it?
Yeah.
But yes, I teach people all the time, to be more resilient.
Yeah, maybe that's the point. And then, am I right to think you did your world record solo? You were by yourself for 39 days. How did that mentally affect you? Because I'm sure you have that talk track of, some hours or some days I'm sure are great, and then you maybe go through a bit of adversity. How did you work with that?
I don't think you were listening to podcasts while you were doing that.
Right.
We get worried we're on an airplane for 4 hours. What are we going to do? What are we going to do?
39 days.
39 days with no technology.
By yourself. What was that like?
Well, I'll just sort of secretly, it was great. Rapidly losing my hero status. Again, because I was prepared, because I was trained, because I had done the trip coast to pole the year before. So I really knew everything to expect. I'd been through every condition Antarctica could possibly throw at you. And I'd learned under the guidance and mentorship of a guide with a team. I'd done all my learning. So when I got back there was nothing that Antarctica threw at me that surprised me or was like, oh my goodness, I've never experienced this before. No, I literally experienced it all last year. And also, I'm a really high functioning introvert, like a deep introvert. Like, I'm very functional. I'll have a bubbly conversation and be the life and soul of the party for a minute, but where I get my power and my energy from is being alone and quiet. And, after a social event, you probably wouldn't see me again for a week because I'll be exhausting. And so that personality type that I am meant that being alone for 40 days was an absolute luxury. It honestly felt like a big meditation exercise almost.
Yeah.
And the joy of not guiding people and not being responsible for people, which all my subsequent trips was that you don't really have to consider anyone else. You can be quite selfish. You can be really disciplined about your timings and your schedule and your routines and everything. Everything's down to you. You've only got yourself to blame or praise. You're just like, it's all you. And I found it incredibly peaceful. It was very peaceful to just withdraw into that routine and movement and move through that landscape.
Just quickly, if you're enjoying the episodes thus far, it would mean a lot to us if you follow and subscribe. Your support helps us continue to bring on incredible guests and share meaningful conversations and stories. Thank you for being a part of the journey.
Let's dig into that a little bit deeper. So you talk about efficiency quite a lot in extreme conditions. You mentioned that the systems, the routines is critical in polar expeditions, that level of detail. Could you give us a couple of examples of when small inefficiencies have snowballed into bigger problems in some of the journeys?
I'm really quite good at knowing what the issues are going to be and heading them off. So I don't really have many stories about, oh no, this all went wrong and it all started from this little thing. I've got a ton of stories of like, there was this little thing and we spotted it and we headed off the big thing. So,
well, tell us a couple of those. That would be great.
Yeah, I think there are classic ones that just happen every time you're in that environment. I teach these courses where we teach everything, and a lot of the modules are based around a tiny thing that everybody's going to do, and it might take 2 or 3 days to train it out of people and get them to understand. So a classic one is navigating in a whiteout. And if you've ever been in a whiteout in a snowy location, you can't, you can't see anything at all. You can't see the ground at your feet. You can't see any reference points. And in Antarctica, there aren't any features anyway, like trees or mountains. Nothing comes out of the gloom at you. No, it's just white all day. And it's absolutely exhausting to navigate in those conditions. And my goal is to train people. They'll have a compass support on with a compass sitting flat in front of them here all day long. There it is. And my goal is to train people to say, when you're at the front navigating, you have to look at that compass and nothing else. You just have to stare at your compass, be aware of how your lateral movement affects the needle, keep it on your bearing, and ski. And in your subconscious, you're feeling the ground under your feet as you're skiing and making sure you don't fall. But essentially, you're just staring at your compass. There is nothing to look at. Don't look up and try, because the second you look up and try, you will gradually start, not even gradually, you'll almost immediately start drifting slightly in one direction. And the trick to it is, especially when you're in a team with multiple people in a row, one behind the other, is you have a buddy who's the third person back or the fourth person back, who's your navigation second. And it's their job to notice if the line is starting to bend, because you can see it best from further back. And then you whoop your buddy and you're like, whoop, and they're like, oh, correct. But if you're staring at your compass, that rarely happens once you get a little bit good at it. If you're just like staring at your compass, the line will go straight all day. But the second people look up and like, oh, maybe I can see something. Can I see something? You'll start turning. And that tiny turn is the tiny incremental thing that you want to eliminate. And, I've had people really wound up and be like, don't stop. It's only a tiny bit. It doesn't matter. But over the course of a day, if you sort of drift 10, 12 feet off to the left and then correct and then go straight and then do it again. And then I call it scalloping, because instead of going in a nice straight line, you start going in this this scalloped line that goes off in one direction, because people always make their directional mistake in the same direction. I'm a lefty. And over the course of a day, that can take you miles off course. I've done it in the field as an example and allowed somebody navigating to just do their sort of scalloping, I've gone wrong, correct. Oh, I've gone wrong, correct. Oh, and I've gone straight for half an hour, and we were half a mile apart. So that's such a great example of this tiny incremental thing that you think, it doesn't matter. I'll correct in a second. It's hardly anything, but over the course of days, weeks, can be huge.
Yeah,
Does that make sense?
And I assume that, that could lead to issues with crevasses. It could lead to issues with just getting lost. There could be animals. I guess there could be all sorts of things where that becomes dangerous.
It can do, yeah. Certainly if you're homing in on an important waypoint that, as you say, is taking you around a crevasse field or something, you don't want to drift off into the wrong direction at all. Blisters, classic one that everyone on listening could relate to. That tiny little bit of a hot spot, and you think, I'll just finish the hike. I'm nearly at the car. That one. And by the time you get to the car, you've got a blooming great blister on your heel, and you can't do that on a multi-day expedition, because that blister is never going to get better then. That's a massive problem.
Yeah. So that's all about preparation around the gear, the socks you're wearing, the boots you're wearing, the types of skis, etc.
That too. And just being responsive to your body and going, oh, I've never had a hot spot before in this foot gear, but today I am. So I'm going to stop immediately and get something on it so it's protected. And people really struggle with that. They really struggle with the peer pressure of, I don't want to stop the team. And I thought, well, I'd just wait till the next break. And, but we're behind, and, all of that stuff. Doesn't matter.
When I was listening to you there talking about the scalloping and going off, I was trying to think about, okay, how does this apply to everyday life or high stress situations or in business? So what I was thinking there, this is you've got a great business, you've worked out a process and system, you're going like this, and then everybody just wants to go, let's do something new. let's look at that nice little shiny object over there. And then we stop doing this a little bit. And then we do another bit new and another bit new. And then before you know it, what was really successful starts to drop away. That was my kind of thing, thinking about that. For you, how do you think what you've just said applies to everyday life or high stress situations in other fields?
Oh my goodness, in so many ways. I think everybody listening would relate to personal health. Or I do it because I'm a sugar addict, and the moment I start eating sugar in my life, I start eating the wrong everything and too much of everything, and so, but it's this tiny trigger.
Then,
it's the gateway drug.
It's not just
gateway
me then.
drug. And you know what the worst gateway sugar drug is? Fruit. Blooming fruit. We're like, oh, but it's fruit, so it's healthy. Not to a bona fide sugar addict like me. So I'll be really good, cold turkey, just no sugar in my life for months on end. And I'm just like feeling the best. And then I'll suddenly be like, strawberry season will come around and I'll be just like, I'll just have some strawberries because it's fruit and it's healthy, and I'll just have a little bit of fruit. And then I'll just have I'll just have a square of plain chocolate because plain chocolate's healthy. And I'll just have a little square of plain chocolate. And then I'll just have, but it's a birthday party. I'll just have that giant piece of birthday cake as big as my head. And, before, that's exactly the same thing, these little increments that creep into my unhealthy phases, and I think we all go through these waves of levels of healthiness and our relationship to fitness, diet, our mental health, our work boundaries, that kind of thing, I think. But it all starts with these little things, microaggressions in the workplace. It just starts with I didn't really like what you said. Maybe you didn't mean it. Maybe maybe I'm just being sensitive. And then that suddenly a year later you're being full on bullied by somebody. That kind of thing. Like all of our personal and physical and emotional problems, I think, start with these little incremental things that, if you just knew to nip them in the bud at the start, you'd make huge impacts in your life. But that stuff comes with wisdom and experience, and sometimes not very nice experience.
Yeah, I think that's something we can all relate to in various ways, whether it's food or people. You mentioned the whiteout earlier. And when I was doing research on you, you dislocated your shoulder while you were doing one of the treks in a whiteout. As I was thinking through that, I was thinking, okay, well, how do you stay calm? How do you stay grounded? So what practices do you use in those moments? And then how do you recover both physically and mentally from those setbacks? Because you still have more to go.
Yeah. Well, that particular incident was a trip ender. I was probably a bit broken and needed to be fixed. So I was trying to solo to the North Pole on that occasion, and as you say, I dislocated my shoulder. But I think the tricky thing about that situation, I fell into a feature in the ice that I couldn't immediately get out of, and that was probably the scariest situation I've been in. The scariest tangible situation I've been in. We all have intangible fears, don't we? But that was properly, I'm not going to survive if I don't get out of this hole. And I think in that moment, you're very, well, personally, I had an initial adrenaline response and cried and shook and I bit my tongue as well, and my mouth was bleeding. I was just like, oh. And then quite quickly, having allowed that response and allowed myself to cry and freak out a little bit, that dealt with that. It was like, okay, that's not practical anymore. Sometimes you just have to listen to your, your body's cortisol responses and just okay, I just need to vent this, this noxious gas out of me, and then it allows you to recover your sense of control and bring yourself back to a level that's practical and useful, which is what happened in that scenario. I was able to use my ski like a ladder to step up out of the hole, and my ski poles like a handrail to pull myself up and out. And once I was out of the hole, and I knew it was game over, and I put my tent up and called in an evacuation. But yeah, I think sometimes, especially again us Brits, with our wretched stiff upper lips, I think we do quite a good job of really stifling emotion and these natural responses to difficulty and trauma, and I don't think it serves us particularly well. I think bottling up. We're learning this. We are evolving as a species. We are understanding that.
Hey, Hannah, I'll tell you about this one. So obviously, as I've got older, I was the same. Would just get on with it. I remember playing soccer. If you got an injury, they put a wet sponge in your head and told you to get back out there, and etc. But it's interesting. Lauren will tell you now, I cry like a baby. I see anything now, I'm just like floods of tears. And I can't even tell you any of them because I'll start crying now. It's quite interesting. So that stiff upper lip, I don't know whether it's just age or things are changing in society. It definitely seems to me to be softening a little bit.
Definitely. I was listening. Do you watch that lovely show, Welcome to Wrexham?
Fantastic show.
I was just watching an episode last night where they had a psychologist in who was talking about the relationships between men and their relationships with sports, and how the relationship with sport allows them to express their emotions and their relationships, their closeness in a way that a lot of men can't do without some kind of trigger or crutch that assists that. And we were having a chuckle, they had a little montage of guys hugging each other, and there's you take each other's hands and you do that while you do the hug and pat, kind of, and then, but as the relationship develops, it might be a 2-arm hug and the pat, but then it's it was so interesting but then in sports on the field, a goal happens and everybody's just like all over each other and hugging each other, and it's something about unlocking the ability to express what is truly in our hearts, whether that's
I can concur with that. But, from a male perspective, totally concur with that for sure.
Yeah, and I like what you
said.
Have
to learn to let it out,
Yeah, exactly. I was just going to say, I really like what you said of have your moment, let it out, right? Emotion is energy in motion. Get it out, let it out. Don't keep it in. And then let's move on. Let's be proactive. I really like that advice.
Yeah, absolutely.
So back to this sort of meticulous attention to detail that you have to go through for these polar expeditions. Let's get into the physical wellness. So how do you ensure that your body remains functional and healthy in these extreme environments? And are there specific ways that you train in terms of regimes around wellness practices that you help you prepare, but help your clients to prepare?
I'm really going to expose myself as a fraud here because I think I've done every polar expedition I've ever done off the couch, basically. But such a fraud. But I am a very mobile and active human generally, and I'm strong, and I'm also a very big woman. I'm 6'2" and 200 pounds. So I've learned to use that body mass to my advantage, especially pulling a big heavy sled. I can counterweight. Over
how much do they weigh, by the way? How much do these sleds weigh on average?
They weigh about, I want to say 80 to 100 kilos, depending on if you're unsupported or supported, and I can't translate that into pounds suddenly.
Oh, so it's 2.2 pounds a kilo, so that's roughly 200 pounds.
Yeah, exactly. There you
go. So you're basically pulling your own weight. Is what you're saying, because that'll give all the people who go to the gym and pull sleds an idea. Imagine pulling that sled for 639 miles and roughly, what was it, 39 days that you did it in?
Well, the short one, yes. Yeah.
I mean, 2 minutes of pushing a sled.
But I would at least think that maybe there's less friction, though.
True.
Yeah. Spot on, Lauren. Yes. Yeah. So it sort of doesn't matter how much your sled weighs. What matters is the resistance when you try and pull it across snow. And I'm always telling my students this. You can take an elephant with you if you've got no friction,
But surely the snow conditions change. Sometimes they're icy, sometimes they're slushy, sometimes,
exactly.
and that's got to make it change.
Yeah, comes down to your equipment and how high tech the materials of your runners are, and the design of your sled, and how it performs in soft snow or hard snow. Everything performs
Okay,
fine
so
on
you're
hard
obviously
snow ice.
badass. You've obviously got genetics that allow you to do this. So what about the people that you're preparing? Tell us a bit about what you do for them with their physical and
Yeah,
wellness before they go.
I think the key things is this is an endurance activity. You don't have to be a runner or a sprinter, thank goodness, because I am not. You have to have body resources that you can eat into. I have those in abundance. And you have to have endurance fitness, the ability to just keep plodding along at a consistent pace for 60 days or whatever it is. And I think there are some humans that are really well adapted to that, and some that truly aren't. I think the people that I've witnessed getting into the most trouble in Antarctic expeditions or Arctic expeditions tend to be overtrained at the start. I think the best place to come is to come in, below your peak and have somewhere to go with your fitness and your strength as you're moving through the expedition. If you come in at absolute peak fitness and zero body fat and lean and muscular, your body, it has nowhere to go. I think, allow yourself to have somewhere to go through the expedition, and and know that that's going to happen in waves as you go through. You're going to hit a peak of strength and feeling good, and then it's going to dip off, and you'll think, oh no, I've burnt out or something. And then no, it's just your body having a little recovery period, and you work through it for a few days, and then you come up onto the next wave. You should end these trips with no body fat and absolute, maximum muscle mass, rather than start them there.
There's a reason why an antelope lives in Africa and a polar bear looks like it does while it lives in
Totally.
they only live in the Arctic, polar bears, don't they? They don't live in the Antarctic, do
Only in
they?
the Arctic,
In
yes,
the
well
Arctic,
done.
that's what I thought.
Yeah.
So let's talk about cold. Okay, so right now there is this huge wave of everybody jumping in a plunge pool. They've all got these regimes. They're all doing this. What's your thoughts on the benefits of getting in cold plunge pools and the amount of time that you do it, etc.? You're the cold goddess. So what do you think about this?
Do you know, I'm sure it's absolutely spot on. The times when I have plunged into cold water, usually unintentionally, you do quickly adjust and then feel sort of amazing afterwards, don't you? But I've literally made a career of trying to never feel cold. So it's not something I seek out. I haven't joined that revolution. But I've definitely enjoyed that feeling of being at a Swedish spa and being in the sauna and then jumping out in the cold water and then going back in. I get it. It feels amazing. I don't think I'm an expert on the science of it. I love being in a cold environment for long periods of time. And I love that sense of acclimatization that happens when you're in a cold place and getting cold for a long time, and your resistance for it sort of builds up. And I remember saying this on a podcast we did for Muscle Sound years ago. I always try to teach my students to start comfortably cool. It's really important to not get overly warm when you're doing these expeditions. The reason people get really cold and hypothermic is because at some point in the near past, they've got too warm and they've sweated and they've allowed their clothing and their bodies to get damp. And that's what super chills and gets cold and causes them to become hypothermic and properly cold. So it's this fine balance of I never spend my time cold, but I never spend my time warm either. My goal is to be in this zone of being comfortably cool. Some guides say, be bold, start cold, and that's absolutely right. You want to start each march of the day feeling, holy moly, I'm really cold, come on, let's get going. And then you start working hard and you build up to this level of activity where your body's generating the right amount of heat to balance off the ambient cold, and you get this nice sweet spot of being comfortably cool. But you're constantly adjusting your layers and taking something off or venting so that you can keep that balance where you're not breaking into a sweat. You're feeling cool and comfortable, but you're not getting hot and
So let me ask you a specific question. So
Yeah.
Lisa suffers a bit from Raynaud's, and she gets very cold fingers and toes. What advice would you give for her?
Really, really difficult. I have guided several people on long trips that have had Raynaud's, and it's just really hard to manage. I think using physics to actually aid those extremities. What's happening is the blood is being sucked away from your extremities to your core, and people with Raynaud's have a more extreme trigger in their nervous system to do that. And I think one of the most effective things is actually to use centrifugal force to spin your arms really rigorously, and actually use the centrifugal force to throw the blood back out into your hands and your extremities. So that's like my absolute go-to. Also, getting your core to fire up and get really warm and hot. So make sure that you've eaten enough so that you've actually put fuel into the furnace. And then I'll sometimes have people who are really struggling with cold response. If we've got to stop and put up a tent, for example, at camp, I'll say, right, not you run laps around the camp while the rest of us are putting the tent up. Keep that core firing, keep that furnace going, to keep those extremities warm until you can get into a genuinely warm space where they can actually start to relax and wind their system down. So using physics or physiology intelligently and understanding what it is about your system that's causing your body to do certain things.
So basically,
and then the other thing, that number 3 is that people get obsessed by putting more and more protection onto their hands in the form of gloves and liner gloves. And if you think about your fingers, each of your fingers is a little cylinder, and cylinders and spears are the most effective shape for losing heat because most surface area. So fingers are by their nature in isolation prone to heat loss because of their shape and how little they are. So I'm a massive advocate of no liner gloves, no extra gloves. Take all of that off and get your bare digits together and make them into a bigger object. And best of all, then make them into a fist and maybe tuck in the thumbs and make them into a really big object. Suddenly, this is an object that is not going to lose heat effectively. And shove that object into a mitten. Put your insulation around a big fleshy mass rather than lots of little fleshy masses. That is hands down the most effective way of retaining any heat that's left in hands. If hands are already beyond cold, you might have to introduce a chemical heat like a hand warmer or something. But that's pretty effective. Getting those fists into some mittens and then swinging around to get the blood flow back into the extremity.
So I love that. Basically, Lisa, when she hikes in the winter, needs to wear mittens and do a Zumba class as she's going up the hill.
Yeah, swing her arms.
Swing her arms around Zumba. I got it.
Yeah. So you've often highlighted the importance of nonverbal communication, but because you're in extreme conditions, sometimes you can't physically speak to one another. So how do you train teams to do this, and what lessons can be applied to everyday leadership and teamwork?
So experience plays into it a lot, because after 20 years in this environment, there's nothing I haven't seen a person or a team or conditions do. So experience is huge. And once you have that experience, or as you're gaining that experience, if you're less experienced in your background, it's about acknowledging, is this a thing that could happen again? And how could we improve our response to it? If we've decided, this isn't a black swan event, this is something that we're going to experience multiple times. Okay, how can we respond to that? And I think that's how I've developed my my sign language shorthand, I suppose. And so now I just roll it out with every team that I'm going into the field with. I'm like, okay, we're going to experience X, Y, and Z, and here's how we're going to communicate in those conditions. So, and it's pretty simple. It's it's the ability of a team to look back in a howling gale, and as long as you can see everybody, how do we establish if everyone's okay and ready to go? Well, I'm going to ask a question. I'm going to put my arms out in a T like this. That's a question. And I'm not going to take that question down until I've seen a physical response answer from everyone in the team. So when you start training people, they sort of throw it up in a vague way and somebody responds and they're like, okay, fine, off we go. I'm like, no. You are waiting for a physical response answer from everybody in the team. So if you've got 10 people in a row and the last person is 50 feet away, you're going to wait, and sometimes someone's futzing and hasn't looked up and seen the question, and you hold that question until you've seen an answer from everybody, and then you know everybody is okay and ready to go. So it's things like that. Or if you're not ready to go, what's that symbol going to be? I typically have crossed arms above my head, or crossed sticks, ski sticks above my head. And this is universally used throughout the mountains, this type of sign language to communicate with a group in bad conditions. But I think more interestingly is being a guide, being the person who's responsible for these things. And this isn't so much about signaling and communicating, which is, half a dozen very simple things that everybody learns quickly. But as a guide, you are looking for the tiny telltale things which are communication to you that someone has a problem, because some people are really bad at communicating when they have a problem, especially if they're, athletes and competitive and strong, and, Bob, who's an ultra marathon runner and an athlete, is not going to tell you when his knee's hurting. So when I'm training guides, or, I've got an apprentice guide with me, I say, we guide from the back. We're not out front navigating and, leading the team. We're not leaders, we're guides, and we guide from the back because that's where you can see everybody. And you start picking up on these tiny nuances. If you spend all day at the back and all you're doing is looking at your people all day, every day, you'll notice when Linda's moving a bit different than she normally does. There's just something about, what is it? I don't even know what it is. I'm going to go and ask her. You're all right today? I've got a bit of a sore shoulder, actually. Huh? Or, somebody's just blown away. What is that? Stab. Oh, somebody's mitten. Okay, somebody's lost their mitten. Or you can only know what's going on with your team if you are looking at them. And I think that is so translatable as well into real life, into the corporate world, into project management. You have to have eyes on things. You have to be paying attention all day, every day. You can't manage from an ivory tower in an office somewhere. You have to be in touch with your team. You have to have eyes on the project, however that looks. You have to be paying attention to the detail, because people by their nature don't want to disappoint. Even the best people don't want to disappoint. Well, I'll manage, I'll cope, and people shouldn't have to manage and cope alone. That's the job of a guide or a leader or a manager, to serve their teams and be there for them in those moments when something is a small thing starting to be a struggle before it becomes a big thing for the whole team.
Yeah.
So taking that, to the extremes of, looking at the physicality. So you're pushing beyond limits, and in pole expeditions, you're constantly pushing the boundaries of human endurance. Maybe you aren't, based on your athletic prowess, but others are. How do you find the balance between pushing your limits and knowing when to listen to your body or mind? And then how would you give advice to someone who's trying to achieve, the similar sort of balance in their fitness or personal goals between that sort of challenge of pushing yourself and having the ability to listen to your body or mind?
Yeah, it's really tricky. It's such a balance. I always listen to my physical body, especially, I'm 52 now. I can't be suffering through pain like I used to, because I just don't bounce back, But I think on those big expeditions, you have to listen to your physical body. If you've got a tweaky knee or a bit of a blister or a sore shoulder, you have to ask yourself, is this something that's going to get exponentially worse if I keep pushing? In which case, stop immediately and figure out what the mitigating measures that you need are. And it might just be adjusting something. It might just be putting a pad on a heel, or it might just be changing your harness a bit so your shoulder stops hurting because it's pulling differently, or a knee or a knee injuries are showstoppers typically anywhere. So, paying attention and stop going, oh no, I need to stop and I need to put up a tent immediately and I need to rest this maybe for 24 hours and see how it feels, because otherwise I'm out of here and it's over. So physical things are quite easy. They're sort of black and white, really. You just sort of make the judgment call. Is it going to get worse if I carry on? Is that going to stop my expedition? Okay. It's like a flow chart that's quite easy. I think the emotional stuff is harder. I think I'm more inclined to push through a grumpy day and not give up. And I think maybe that's something that one can learn and train oneself to do. I often see teams out in the field, not that I'm with, but, observing every year all the people that go and do these types of expedition. And there'll be nasty weather for a couple of days. And I'll read in the situation reports of the teams, Team X has been tent bound for 2 days. So, the weather was too bad and they haven't been able to move. And that's a psychological thing. You're getting psyched out by Antarctica then. I tell the teams and the people that I train, do the toilet test, because you always dig a hole near your camp to go and use the toilet. And I was like, if you are able to get up in the morning, pull on your down booties and your jacket and, huddle your way over to the toilet and take a pee and get back to the tent, then could you not have moved all day? Like you just moved 100 yards over there and 100 yards back again.
Yeah.
So get out of your tent and go and do that all day. It doesn't matter if you're not hitting the pace that you would on a nice day. It wouldn't matter. It doesn't matter if it's exhausting. It doesn't matter if it's not fun, if it's unpleasant. Those aren't the reasons you're there. You're there to make miles and be successful in your goal. And if your goal is getting somewhere within a set amount of time, a finite amount of time, then you need to move. And what else are you going to do? Sit in a tent all day or for 2 days or goodness knows 3 days? There's nothing else to do. Just get up and move through the blizzard. Not a problem. I don't think I have ever experienced a day on Antarctica where I couldn't have moved all day outside. Even in the worst storms I've ever seen, you can do it. You might only go 5 miles instead of your usual 15 miles, but still that's 5 miles you're not doing tomorrow, isn't it?
Yeah. So what sort of transformation have you seen in people taking your course before and after, especially in terms of mental toughness and self-awareness? I'm sure there's huge changes.
Oh gosh, yeah. Sometimes it's really notable, the transformation that you see. Not only in the courses that we teach, because they're 2 weeks and there's so much you can do in 2 weeks, but often it's profound what you can do in 2 weeks. But on trips that I've guided people on over 50 days, the difference can be, deeply profound. It can be life-changing, the difference that, you can see in people, that you can affect in people. I always say when I was guiding, you guide a person for 50 days and you get them to the South Pole and you get them through every hardship that they've experienced, and you just know that when they get home, they're going to stand in the pub with their pint and go, "Oh yes, I skied to the South Pole. Oh yeah, I did that last year. I'm kind of a bit of a big deal. And really, wow, how did you navigate? Oh well, you navigate like this. Oh really? How did you stay somewhere? No, we made a camp every night." And they're never going to mention their guide. They're never going to go, "God, I couldn't have done it without Hannah. I knew nothing and she made it all okay." They're never going to say that. So early on in my guiding career, I was like, so I'm going to make sure that when they're stood in the pub with their pint, bragging about how they skied to the South Pole, by golly, they're going to have earned it. They're going to have every skill they brag about. They're going to be able to navigate straight as a die in any conditions. They're going to be able to put up a tent in any conditions. They're going to be able to do all of the business of polar, expeditioning completely independent of me. That was always my guide as a goal. My goal as a guide, I wanted them to own it. I wanted it to be theirs. By the time we rocked up into the South Pole or wherever, I wanted them to be doing everything independent, really wondering why I was even there still. That's perfect for me. And that's how I approach the courses as well. A lot of polar expedition training services and courses are associated with guide services. So it's more of an add-on or a business builder. They're either saying, "Oh, you want to cross Greenland with us? Okay, well, you'll have to do these 3 training events with us first to prepare." And right and good. Yes, that's a great thing. Or they're saying, "Oh, you've done our training course now. Now we could sell you a guided trip across Greenland," that way around. And at my school, Polar Expedition Training, we are absolutely a school only. We are not a guide service. We never will be. That's part of, my mindset for it. And our goal as a school is to make people as individually independent as they can possibly be, whether it's because they want to go and ski the Kungsleden in Sweden and, a very sort of front country sort of trip, but do it by themselves, or whether they want to ski solo to the South Pole or do a team trip across Greenland, whatever it is, our goal is to try and get those people as independent and as skilled as they can possibly be. And often the training isn't enough, but we'll then set them up with a roadmap to where they want to be as well. We'll say, okay, well, you've done the training now, so now you need to do maybe, a crossing of the Hardangervidda in Norway. That would be a week's trip, and then you should build up to maybe doing a 2-week trip somewhere. And those aren't guided services we're offering. We're just building a roadmap for people. And I'm really proud of that. I believe in people's ability to become very independent. And it might be that they only reach a point where they're comfortable joining a guided trip, but they will join a guided trip very competent and very confident, and they're not going to feel overwhelmed. And regardless of the caliber of the guide staff they might find themselves with, they're gonna be prepared and comfortable and ready for that thing.
Yeah. Actually, just quickly, I'd love to hear your courses. When are they? Like, how could I sign up if I was interested in them?
Thanks for the plug. Well, we're called Polar Expedition Training. We do what it says on the tin, so pretty easy to remember. We fondly call ourselves PET, but Polar Expedition Training. We've got a website, polarexpeditiontraining.com, and we run courses every winter in Norway. Very easy to get to via Oslo or Bergen. And they're always these 2-week boot camps, totally 0 to hero mentality. We've had people show up on day one who've never seen snow before. I had a student from Brazil and a student from Sri Lanka, and then some ladies from Malaysia, all of whom had never seen snow before.
Good way to get into it.
Yeah, super fun. But all of those people went on to do really competent expeditions. The Malaysian girls skied the last degree to the South Pole. The Brazilian did a solo cycle across Lake Baikal in midwinter. These people find something within themselves that they had no idea would be there, and we've got amazing alumni. A lot of the incredible lady soloists who've been around in the last 10 years. Molly Hughes, Jenny Davis, Wendy Searle, and the amazing Paula Preet. They are all ex-PET alumni lady soloists who we've trained and we're so proud of. They're just amazing.
So let me just pick that up then. So one of the pillars of our podcast is about kindness. So is there someone, I know you mentioned, I think it was your uncle who gave you the house, etc. But is there someone else you'd like to just show kindness to, just give a shout out to, or some sort of acknowledgement for their impact in your life?
Oh, too easy. Well, a year ago it would have been my dad and this person, but my dad passed away last year. So my dad and my stepmom, family's everything, isn't it, really? They've been so impactful to me, supporting me in all the madcap things I did, all the blowing of my inheritance on these madcap expeditions. Like, okay, darling. But, my dad was my greatest supporter and my biggest fan, but, quietly, by his side, my stepmom, Jane, who lives in England. And, especially in the last year since she lost my dad, they were together for 36 years. And, she's now learning how to live alone without him in her life. But she's just the bedrock of our family. She's got 2 children. I was the only child of my dad, and she's got 7 grandchildren. And she's just selflessly always there for everybody, always supporting everybody, always the cheerleader for everyone in our family. She's just fantastic and such an unsung hero, as so often the older generation end up being.
Just quickly before you sign off, don't forget to visit network.allwellco.com and join our professional network. You'll get to enjoy exclusive benefits from brands we love and have access to a community where learning and professional development are always at the forefront of everything we do.